You've probably heard about Finland's schools, right? They're legendary. But today, we're going to pull back the curtain and go way beyond the headlines. We're talking about the big ideas, the crazy surprising history, and, yeah, some of the really tough challenges this world-famous system is facing right now.
And look, that reputation, it's been earned. For decades, Finland was just constantly at the top of the international rankings. They basically became the gold standard. You had educators from all over the world making pilgrimages there, all trying to figure out the same thing. What is their secret?
Okay, this picture, it pretty much says it all, doesn't it? This is Tyne. She's a school dog, and her job is to help students who are having a tough time. I mean, think about that. It's the perfect little snapshot of the incredible trust and freedom they give their teachers. The system is so flexible, so human, that a dog can literally be part of the lesson plan.
All right, so let's get into it. Let's talk about the legend itself. What were those big ideas that made everyone so jealous of Finland's schools? Seriously, their whole approach is probably a lot different than what you're used to. Just check out these principles. We're talking minimal homework. No big, stressful, standardized tests. The whole vibe is cooperation, not cutthroat competition. And they actually build in time for play. Shorter school days, more breaks, and holding it all together, the teachers. Every single one is highly respected and has a master's degree. That's the bedrock.
So here's where you can really see the contrast. On one side, you have the traditional, top-down model with high-stakes tests breathing down your neck. But the Finnish approach? It's all about trust and teacher autonomy. They're not trying to sort and rank kids against each other. Instead, they're focused on well-being and making sure everyone gets a fair shot. The whole mindset shifts from, what's your grade, to how are you doing and how can we help you learn?
So, the moment the world really sat up and took notice was back in 2000. That's when the first ever PISA results were released. Now, PISA isn't your typical memorization test. It's all about applying what you know to real-life situations. And who came out on top? Finland. Just like that, a phenomenon called PISA tourism was born. Suddenly, everyone wanted to fly to Finland and see the magic for themselves.
So that begs the question, right? Where did this incredible, revolutionary model actually come from? Well, the answer might just surprise you, because they didn't just invent it out of thin air. No, the original blueprint, it came from somewhere you would never, ever expect. Believe it or not, back in the 1970s, Finland looked to the United States. Yep, at that point in time, the American education system was actually seen as a beacon of forward-thinking, progressive ideas. And they didn't just borrow a few things, they adopted some core American ideals. Things like focusing on the whole child, not just their test scores, using education to promote equity and democracy, and that classic progressive idea of learning by doing. They saw the U.S. starting to build these comprehensive schools for everyone, and they basically said, okay, we love that. We're going all in on that vision.
But here's the key thing to understand. Finland's success wasn't some happy accident. It was the result of slow, patient, intentional changes over decades. They made teaching a true profession, pushed power down to the local level, and gave schools the freedom to figure out what works best for their own students.
And that brings us to right now, because as powerful as that legend is, the reality today, well, it's gotten a lot more complicated. The system that everyone thought was perfect is now starting to show some serious cracks.
Which leads to the big question, doesn't it? If this system was the perfect blueprint, why are its world-famous results suddenly slipping? What happened?
And this right here, this is the data that set off all the alarm bells. Look at that. After being at the very top of the world back in 2000, Finland's PISA scores have taken a nosedive. Today, they're not just off the top spot, they're actually below the average for other developed countries.
So what in the world is going on? Well, there's no single easy answer. Experts are pointing to a whole storm of issues all hitting at once. Things like maybe going too digital, too fast in classrooms. We're seeing budget cuts that are causing teacher shortages. There's a real decline in student mental health. And that core value of equity, it's being challenged by growing inequality.
And one of the most shocking examples of this new inequality is the gender gap in reading. Now, girls in Finland are still reading at a very high level, which is great. But the scores for boys have absolutely plummeted, so much so that Finland now has the fourth biggest gender gap in reading in the entire world.
And it's not just boys. That promise of equity for all, it seems to be failing students from immigrant backgrounds. In fact, a report from their own Ministry of Education says these kids have the lowest reading scores in the entire developed world. That's a huge, stark contrast to the legend we all know.
Another big piece of the puzzle is this huge push for more tech in the classroom. Now that sounds good, right? But some are calling it a rush to digitalization, and it might have some serious side effects. For one, kids are sleeping less, about 7.5 hours a night when they really need 8 to 10. And when you're tired, it's just harder to learn. And what about those highly respected teachers, the foundation of the whole system? Well, many of them feel like their jobs have become way more bureaucratic, bogged down in paperwork instead of, actually teaching. On top of that, budget cuts are leading to real shortages, and that's hitting special education especially hard. So you put it all together, and Finland is really at a crossroads. They're trying to figure out how to take those amazing principles that made them famous and make them work in the messy, digital, and often unequal world we live in today.
This right here really puts it all into perspective. On one side, you have the legend, teacher prestige. But the reality? It's burnout and shortages. The legend says equity for all. The reality? Widening gaps based on gender and background. The legend promised a student-centered utopia. The reality? They're wrestling with the dark side of digitalization and maybe a lack of structure. So what's the takeaway here? Well, the story of Finnish education has evolved. It's not a simple fairy tale blueprint for success anymore. It's become something maybe even more interesting. A really complex, real-world case study of how even the best system in the world has to fight to adapt to modern pressures.
And that leaves us with one big final question. Can a system that was built on these beautiful ideals of trust and well-being actually solve the tough new challenges of a digital and unequal world? Honestly, nobody knows. The next chapter for Finland's schools is being written right now, and you can be sure the rest of the world is watching very, very closely.